Elara Hayes had no idea that picking up a wallet on the floor of a crowded café would change her life forever. It was raining hard outside, the kind of cold spring downpour that made everything feel heavier. Elara rushed into Brew and Bean, the little coffee shop near her bookstore job, hair damp, tote bag slipping from her shoulder. She just wanted warmth, caffeine, 5 minutes of peace. But as she reached for a loose napkin at the edge of the counter, her hand brushed against something leather. A wallet, thick, black, sleek, the kind of wallet that looked expensive just by how it felt. She glanced around. No one was near the counter, no one looking panicked. Carefully, she picked it up and opened it just enough to find ID, Nathaniel Locke. She blinked at the name. The photo showed a man with striking dark eyes, short black hair, and a serious expression. Handsome but intense. She flipped through the wallet and froze when she saw the thick stack of black MX and platinum cards, a handful of crisp bills, and a business card that simply read Locke International Holdings. No title, just a logo and a phone number. Wow, she whispered, tucking it into her tote. She wasn't about to leave something like that in a lost and found box. She'd bring it to the address listed on the card later that afternoon after her shift ended. What she didn't expect was for the address to lead her to a skyscraper, towering glass, valet parking, security at the doors. Elara stood outside soaking wet in her bookstore cardigan, canvas bag clutched tight, staring up at the building like it might swallow her whole. Still, she made herself go inside. The receptionist barely looked up. "Appointment? I found this," she said, offering the wallet. "It belongs to a Nathaniel Locke," the woman's eyes snapped up. "One moment." She picked up the phone, murmured something, and then glanced back at Elara. "Mr. Locke will see you." "Wait, what?" Before she could protest, a tall man in a dark navy suit appeared behind the glass doors. He was even more intense in person, taller, broader, sharper. His eyes locked onto hers like he already knew everything about her. "Elara Hayes," he asked, voice deep and smooth. "How do you know my name?" she asked, stunned. "You handed over your driver's license when you walked through security," he said, lips twitching faintly. "Come with me." She followed him into a private elevator, heart pounding. She had no idea why she was nervous, maybe because he was too handsome, too calm, too expensive looking. His office looked like something out of a movie, floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline view, a long glass desk, modern art. He took the wallet from her hand but didn't look at it. "You could have kept it," Nathaniel said, watching her. "I don't steal," she replied, standing straighter. "Even if someone's carrying more money in their wallet than I make in a month." That made him pause. "What do you do?" "I work at a bookstore, small one downtown." "You like books?" "Obviously," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You don't?" "I like people who do," he said simply, then stood. "Come to dinner with me." She blinked, sure she misheard. "What?" "I'd like to thank you properly. Join me for dinner tomorrow night." "I didn't return your wallet to get something out of it." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking." Elara hesitated. Everything about this screamed danger. Not the bad kind. The kind that could twist your whole life around. But something about the way he looked at her, like she wasn't just some ordinary woman in a cardigan, made her say, "Fine. One dinner." The next night, she stood outside a restaurant she'd only seen in magazines. The valet opened the door for her, and inside, every table sparkled with crystal and candles. Nathaniel stood at a private table in the back, wearing a crisp white shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled. She wore the one nice dress she owned. "You came," he said, pulling out her chair. "I still don't know why." "Because I liked the way you looked at me," he said, "like I wasn't important. That's not exactly flattering. It is when everyone else treats you like you're untouchable." She studied him. "You're used to people wanting something from you. All the time," he leaned in. "But I think you're different." Dinner was surreal. He was sharp, funny in a dry way, and asked questions like he genuinely cared about the answers. Where she grew up, her favorite books, why she hated cats. She ended up laughing more than she expected. After dessert, he walked her outside, the air warm with spring. "Can I drop you off?" he asked, gesturing to the sleek black Rolls parked at the curb. I'm not used to people with drivers, she said. You'll get used to me, he replied, opening the door. She didn't say yes. But she also didn't say no. The next week was a blur. He sent coffee to her bookstore with her name on the cup. A hardcover first edition of her favorite novel arrived wrapped in gold ribbon. Then came the flowers. Not roses, wildflowers, with a note that said, "You returned something valuable, I plan to return the favor." She didn't know what she was doing. She barely knew this man, but every time he called and asked her to meet him, she said yes. Dinner at a penthouse rooftop restaurant. A walk through a private art gallery. A late-night drive along the coast. He never pressured, never rushed. But he looked at her like she was the first thing in a long time that surprised him. One night, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city, she asked, "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "You didn't care who I was. You looked at me like I was just a man. I need that." "And what do I need?" she asked, half teasing. He stepped closer, voice low. "Maybe someone who sees how extraordinary you are even when you don't." Before she could respond, his hand brushed her cheek. His lips found hers with a gentleness that made her heart stutter. The kiss was slow, intense, like he'd been waiting for it. She pulled back first, breathless. "You kiss like a man who doesn't play games." "I don't," he said. "Not with you." Elara didn't know what this was between them. But she knew one thing: Nathaniel Locke wasn't just a man with a lost wallet. He was beginning to steal her heart without even trying. Nathaniel didn't call the next day, or the day after that. Elara didn't want to care. She told herself it had been a string of beautiful distractions, nothing more. She was still shelving biographies, still wrapping paperbacks for regulars, still dodging water from a leaky ceiling tile in the back room of the bookstore. But something had shifted. She noticed it when she picked up a copy of The Bell Jar and her fingers trembled. When she paused mid-sentence during lunch break, mentally replaying the way he'd said her name on that balcony. When she caught herself standing too long at the window, watching for a car that never pulled up. By the fourth day, she told herself to let it go. So when he walked into the bookstore on a quiet Thursday afternoon, unannounced, wearing a black coat still dusted with rain, she nearly dropped the stack of poetry books in her arms. Nathaniel locked eyes with her from the entrance, but he didn't move right away. He looked around the small space like he was trying to memorize it. Then he stepped forward, his voice low. "I didn't mean to disappear." "You did anyway," she said, setting the books down, her tone steady but not cold. "I had to fly to Zurich. One of the company's long story and none of it interesting." "Then why are you here?" He reached into his pocket and placed a small red box on the counter between them. "Because I saw this in the airport gift shop and thought of you." She opened it slowly. Inside was a silver bookmark shaped like a feather, engraved with a single line. She was never afraid of the storm, her breath caught. "This is not what I expected." "That makes two of us," he said. She looked up. "Why are you really here, Nathaniel?" "You don't fly across continents for bookstores and bookmarks. I've spent years surrounded by people who say yes before I even finish speaking. You don't. You make me think, and I like how I feel when I'm around you." He leaned forward, voice softer now. "I know I move fast, I live fast. But I don't want this to be something you forget as soon as I leave town again." "What exactly is this?" He hesitated, then said, "Something I'm still trying to figure out, with you." Elara didn't speak right away. Her heart was thudding too loud. She reached for the bookmark and closed the box. "There's a used book auction tonight," she said finally. "I was going anyway, if you're around." His smile was quiet. "I'll be there." That night she expected him to cancel. Instead, he was waiting outside the auction hall in a charcoal suit and no umbrella, letting the rain soak into his sleeves like he didn't even notice. She almost laughed at the sight of him standing there, looking wildly out of place beside a row of teachers, collectors, and eccentric retirees. Inside, the auction was held in a converted library, the walls lined with antique shelves and the air thick with the scent of dust and old leather. Elara guided him through the crowd, pointing out titles and whispering stories about rare finds. When a weathered 19th-century copy of Jane Eyre came up, she leaned in. That one's special. It has the original misprint on page 83. Without a word, Nathaniel raised his paddle. She turned to him, eyes wide. You don't even know what you're bidding. I know enough. He won it. Of course he did. She didn't ask how much it cost. She didn't want to know later. As they walked back to her apartment with the book wrapped carefully under her arm, he said, I want to show you something. She hesitated. Now, my plane leaves in a few hours. I'll be back in 3 days. But before I go, I want you to see something. Against her better judgment, she agreed. The car that picked them up was silent, the interior leather the color of deep wine. It drove them to the edge of the city, where the skyline fell away and the roads turned dark and winding. Eventually, they pulled up to a large gate which opened without a sound. Beyond it stood a house, not a mansion, not a penthouse. A house. Modern and warm, with wide windows and trees surrounding it like a secret. He led her inside. The space was quiet. A fireplace was lit, casting low gold across the hardwood floors. There were books everywhere on shelves, on tables, in neat piles beside the couch. This is where I go when I don't want to be Nathaniel Locke, he said, hands in his pockets. She turned slowly. Who are you here? Someone who remembers what it feels like to be alone without being lonely. She moved to the shelf nearest her and ran a finger along the spines. You read all of these, every one. You really are full of surprises. He walked toward her, his expression unreadable. So are you. She looked up at him, the silence between them stretching. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. You don't have to, just let it happen. He kissed her again, but this time it wasn't careful. It was consuming, like he'd been holding back and didn't want to anymore. When she pulled away, she whispered, You're not going to disappear for another 4 days, are you? He looked at her like she was the only thing in the room. I'll come back, every time. And somehow she believed him. Elara hadn't expected to see the inside of a private jet, let alone be invited aboard one. She hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, the early morning light still cool against her cheeks, her fingers tightening around the strap of her satchel. Nathaniel stood at the top, his suit jacket folded over one arm, his other hand extended toward her. You don't have to come, he said, his voice calm, but I'd really like you to. She stepped forward without answering, letting his hand close around hers. The interior of the jet was more elegant than she'd imagined. Cream leather seats, polished wood panels, a quiet hum in the air that felt like luxury itself. But it wasn't the space that caught her breath. It was the idea that this man, who belonged to a world so far from hers, was asking her to step into it. Where are we going? She asked, settling into one of the seats as he poured 2 glasses of sparkling water. Venice. Her eyes snapped to his. Italy, he nodded. There's a small event for one of the art foundations I support. I thought, if you're free for a few days, you might want to see something extraordinary. People don't just fly to Venice on a whim. I do. She watched him for a beat, then took the glass. Are you always like this? Only with people who make me feel like everything else can wait. The flight passed in a haze of laughter, quiet conversations, and the kind of silence that didn't need filling. When they landed, it was late afternoon, and the city shimmered with golden light. A sleek water taxi waited at the dock, and Nathaniel helped her into it before giving instructions in fluent Italian to the driver. They glided through narrow canals, past faded palazzos and flower-draped balconies, until the boat pulled up beside a private landing. The building that rose above them wasn't a hotel. It was a centuries-old villa with ivy crawling up its sides and arched windows opening onto the water. Inside, the air smelled of citrus and old stone. A woman greeted Nathaniel with a kiss on both cheeks and spoke rapidly in Italian before disappearing into the corridor. Elara stood in the center of the grand foyer, turning slowly beneath a chandelier made of Murano glass. This place is beautiful, she murmured. It's been in the family for 3 generations, Nathaniel said, shrugging off his coat. I come here when I need to remember that time can't be bought. A butler appeared to take their bags, and Nathaniel led her through a series of interconnected rooms until they reached a terrace overlooking the Grand Canal. He handed her a small velvet pouch. "What's this? Open it." Inside was a necklace delicate gold holding a tiny key charm. She looked up at him in confusion. "To the library in the villa, no one else has one," she blinked. "You're giving me a key to your library? I thought you'd like it more than jewelry." He wasn't wrong. That evening, they attended the event, a masquerade held in the courtyard of a restored palazzo, lit entirely by candles and lanterns. Elara wore a silver mask Nathaniel had chosen for her, and the gown they'd had delivered to the villa fit like a second skin. He didn't touch her all night, but his eyes never left hers. At one point, as violins swelled and couples danced beneath the stars, he leaned in close and whispered, "If I asked you to stay longer, would you?" She turned her head until her lips nearly brushed his. "Ask me? I want more time with you, not borrowed hours, days, weeks, all of it." She swallowed hard, the emotion catching in her throat. "What happens when this ends? I don't want it to." They left before the last dance, walking hand in hand through the quiet Venetian streets. When they reached the villa, he paused at the door to her guest room. "I won't come in unless you ask me to." She met his eyes, heart pounding. "You don't need to ask." The days that followed were a blur of sunlit mornings and long, wine-soaked dinners. They explored hidden gardens, shared secrets over espresso on the veranda, and read to each other from the villa's ancient collection of books. One morning, as she stood at the edge of the terrace wrapped in one of his shirts, watching the boats pass below, he came up behind her and pressed something into her hand. It was a contract. "What is this?" she asked, frowning. "A proposal?" She turned to him sharply. "What kind of proposal?" "I want to fund your bookstore. Expand it. Turn it into a second location here in Venice if you'd like. You'd be the face, the heart. I'll stay out of it if that's what you want, but I believe in it. I believe in you." She stared at the document, her mind reeling. "You're serious. I've never been more. I didn't ask for this. And I didn't expect to fall in love with someone who makes me want to build things instead of just buy them." Her breath caught, he stepped closer. "I know you're scared, I am too, but I'm not offering you a cage. I'm offering you wings." She looked down at the contract again, then back at him. "If I say yes, it has to be on my terms, always." He kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for her to say those words. And this time, when she fell asleep in his arms, she didn't wonder when he'd leave again. Because for the first time, she wasn't just part of his world, he was building one with her in it. Elara stood in the center of her bookstore, the one she'd poured 4 years of her life into. And for the first time, it felt like a beginning instead of a finish line. The bell above the door jingled as Nathaniel stepped inside, dressed far more casually than usual, open collar, no jacket, sleeves rolled to the forearm. He looked around without speaking, his gaze drifting over the freshly painted walls, the new reading alcove near the front windows, and the handwritten grand reopening sign hanging above the register. She tilted her head, expecting something more. "Corporate? I was expecting to walk in and find you exactly where you are," he said, approaching. "Right at the heart of it." She handed him a folded slip of paper. "The sales report from yesterday." He glanced at it briefly, then tucked it into his back pocket without comment. "You're not going to read it, Elara. I didn't invest in this place because I want spreadsheets. I invested because I trust you. Then you'll be happy to know we sold out of the translated poetry collection before noon." His eyes lit with something she hadn't seen before, pride, but not just in her success, in her stubbornness. Her refusal to let him carry the whole weight of what they were building. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "You didn't even let me hang the third shelf in the Italian section. I'll hang it. Just come." She followed him out, weaving past a group of teenagers loudly debating over fantasy trilogies and into the street where a sleek black car waited. She raised an eyebrow. "Where are we going? You'll see." The drive was quiet but not uncomfortable. They passed through the city, then out toward the cliffs, where the skyline gave way to open sky and wind-swept trees. Eventually, the car pulled up to the edge of a private estate sitting high above the ocean. Elara stepped out slowly, her shoes crunching on the gravel path. This isn't the villa. No, this place is mine, not my family's. I bought it last year, but I haven't spent a single night in it. She turned to him. Why not? I didn't know what I was waiting for until I met you. He walked ahead, leading her into the house. It wasn't grand in the way his office tower or the Venice villa had been. It was elegant but warm stone archways, wide windows, an open kitchen with copper pots hanging above a long butcher block counter. There were no staff, no waiting trays or folded napkins. Just the scent of citrus and salt in the air. This place is. She trailed off, running her hands along the cool marble counter. It feels like a home. That's what I want it to be. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Holding it out, she hesitated before taking it. Inside was a deed, her name and his side by side, the property listed beneath. She stepped back. You're giving me half a house. I'm giving you a choice. If you want it, it's yours. Not because I need to tie you to me, but because I want to build something permanent with you. And I don't want a world that doesn't have you in it. She looked up at him, eyes wide. This isn't just a grand gesture, is it? No, he said. This is me asking you to stay, not just in the bookstore, not just in Venice, but here in my life. Elara swallowed hard. You don't make this easy. I'm not supposed to. I'm supposed to make it worth it. She took a breath, then walked to the window. Below, the ocean stretched out endlessly, the waves crashing against the rocks like they'd been waiting centuries for someone to listen. I love this view, she said. I love you, she turned slowly. Say it again. I love you, he repeated, his voice steady. And I don't want to spend another day pretending that I don't need you next to me in every room, in every plan I make. She took a step forward. You're not afraid. I've been afraid of everything else, he said. But not this, not you. She reached for his hand, their fingers linking. Then we'll figure it out, together. Later that evening, they stood on the back patio, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun set into the sea. The sky burned gold and violet, and the wind carried the scent of lavender from the garden nearby. You know, Elara said, resting her head on his shoulder, when I picked up your wallet, I thought it was just one more thing I'd carry until I could give it back. Nathaniel turned to her. And now I know I was carrying the beginning of everything. He kissed her temple, then her lips, slow and certain. I think you stole something from me that day, he murmured. She smiled. Your wallet. No, he said. My heart. And this time, when he said it, she let herself believe it was forever. Because it was. The morning breeze tugged gently at the curtains as Elara stepped barefoot onto the balcony, a mug of black tea warming her hands. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, but it was the garden below that drew her attention, newly planted rows of lavender and rosemary lining the stone path. And Nathaniel, kneeling in the soil with his sleeves rolled up and a small shovel in his hand. He glanced up when he heard her step. You said you liked the idea of growing your own herbs. You remembered. I remember everything. She leaned over the railing, watching him press new roots into the earth. You're not exactly the gardening type. I wasn't, he said, standing and brushing off his palms, but I'm learning. She came down the stairs a few minutes later, her hair still damp from the shower, and found him setting a small clay marker into the soil. You labeled it. It's your garden, he said. I just get dirt under my nails. As they walked back into the house together, she glanced toward the long hallway off the kitchen. I saw the boxes arrive yesterday. They are in the study. Want to open them with me? Inside the room that had once been bare, stacks of crates lined the walls. She helped him pry open the first one inside, rows of framed photographs, original sketches, and a few books signed by obscure authors she'd only ever read in borrowed translations. These aren't just artifacts, she said, lifting a signed letter from one of the boxes. They're pieces of history. They're yours now. For the bookstore's permanent collection, I had my team acquire them over the last few weeks, quietly. Her breath caught, but she didn't say thank you, not yet. Instead, she turned to him. You realize this will make the shop a destination, right? That's the idea. I don't even know how to begin curating this. I figured you'd like the challenge. He watched her examine a leather-bound journal with careful reverence, her brow furrowed in thought. Then he stepped close, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want to do something else," he said. She looked up. "What now? A third location?" "No." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a slim black box, not velvet, not flashy, just understated and clean. He opened it without ceremony, revealing a ring with a single emerald set into gold. "I didn't grow up watching the kind of love that lasts," he said. "I built walls, not homes, but then you walked into my life and made everything feel like it could start instead of end. I don't want a life that doesn't include you, not in part, in whole." She didn't blink. "Are you asking?" "I'm asking you to marry me, Elara, not because I want to keep you, but because I want to walk beside you, every step, every turn, every storm." She didn't wait. "Yes." His breath hitched. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had always belonged there. She threw her arms around him, and they stood there, surrounded by shelves that would soon hold stories from the past, writing their own in the silence. Later that afternoon, they drove into the city to meet with the architect who Nathaniel had quietly hired weeks before. The second bookstore location, nestled in a historic building near a quiet canal, was nearly complete. Elara stepped inside and immediately imagined the sound of pages turning, the rustle of curious feet, the scent of fresh paper mingling with espresso from the café corner. "We'll open by autumn," the architect said, handing her the final layout. "Make the reading room bigger," she said. "People stay longer when they feel like they're allowed to." Nathaniel leaned against the doorframe, watching her take charge with a quiet kind of awe. That evening, they returned to the house and found a table set for two on the back terrace, candles flickering in the growing dusk. The staff had left hours ago. Nathaniel had done it himself. "You cooked?" she asked, lifting a brow as he poured wine into her glass. "I followed a recipe. Mostly." They ate under the stars, the hum of crickets and the soft crash of waves the only background music. After dessert, he led her to the edge of the terrace and pulled her close, swaying gently in the moonlight. "There's something I haven't told you," she said, her voice low. "Tell me." "I never imagined this life, not the bookstore, not Venice, not you. But now that I have it, I can't picture anything else." He kissed her forehead. "Then let's never let it go." Weeks passed. The bookstore opened its second location to a crowd that wrapped around the block. Elara gave the first tour, and Nathaniel stood quietly in the back, watching as she described the rare items on display with a passion that made people lean in and listen. She hired a staff of 6, trained them herself, and launched a reading series that brought in authors from across Europe. The shop became a haven not just for visitors but for the community. Kids curled into armchairs, couples met in the poetry aisle, and every so often Nathaniel would sneak in and leave a new book on her desk, always unsigned, always with a single note tucked inside. One afternoon, she found him in the courtyard garden of their home, lounging with a book in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. "You know," she said, curling beside him, "I think we did it." He looked at her over the rim of his glass. "Did what?" "Built everything that matters. And we're just getting started." They married in the garden behind the house, with only 20 guests and a string quartet playing beneath the olive trees. She walked barefoot down the aisle, the hem of her dress brushing soft petals, and when she reached him, he whispered something only she could hear. It made her laugh through tears, and when they kissed, it tasted like every chapter they'd written and every one still to come. That night, as they lay in bed with the windows open and the sea breeze drifting through, Elara traced lazy circles on his chest. "Do you ever miss the man you were before all this?" "I don't remember him," he said. "I only remember the man who fell in love with a woman holding his wallet in a coffee shop." She smiled against his skin. "You still owe me a replacement bookmark. I gave you a ring. I think we're even." And in the quiet that followed, with the world outside soft and still, they fell asleep wrapped in each other, their story not beginning, not ending, but finally, completely, theirs.